Hi, I'm Mr.E. An Inspector Calls was written in 1946, however it remains really popular to this day. That's why you're studying it. One of the reasons why it's remained so popular is because it has this false ending and it also has this fantastic twist towards the end of the second act. That means there are plenty of opportunities to write about structure. In this English hack we'll be looking at how you write about structure when it comes to Inspector Calls, and we're going to try and cover as many bases as possible. So let's get on with it! Through character, through themes and ideas, and through dramatic technique. One important thing we're also going to be thinking about is conceptualized ideas. What this means is coming up with truly original and genuinely interesting points about structure. Although Burling's character doesn't really develop greatly during the play, there are important structural sequences and ideas that we can compare between the start and the end. So at the start of the play, for example, he's very proud of the fact that he might be attaining a knighthood. By the end of the play, a lot of the decisions he makes are driven by the fear of losing that. This exposes him as a hypocrite. He says that he places family first, but quite clearly he's more interested in his knighthood. He's a capitalist, and his interest in capitalism means that he won't be budged on his decisions throughout the events of the play. Mrs. Burling is another character who doesn't change through the play. She's very consistent and stubborn. This is largely to do with the confidence that she has as being an upper class character compared to some of the others. However, as the events of the play mount, she is under increasing threat from the inspector, especially when it comes to her own interrogation. This, by the way, falls outside of the chronology of events, so she is interrogated before Eric. What this means is that the surprise about Eric being the father of Edith Smith's child becomes even more dramatic for the audience. Also, we can compare the lack of development with her character to her daughter Sheila, who matures very much as the play goes on. Sheila is a character who changes very much between the start and the end of the play. One of the key things in which you can demonstrate that is by looking at the stage directions that Priestley uses. Also, we can look at the way she handles her changing attitudes towards Gerald when she finds out that he's betrayed her with Eva Smith. There is a growing awareness of other people around her and a sense of responsibility. You can make a lot of clear contrast between the Sheila at the start to a much more mature young woman who is at the end of the play. He's unflinching and unchanging. This is probably because of his social class that gives him a supreme confidence. It's also important to look at the chronology of Gerald's affair. The fact that he was having his affair with Eva Smith at the point when he was thinking about his engagement to Sheila. We can also see that the lies that he's telling throughout the play show him to be an untrustworthy character. Leading up to the false ending, at the end of the play, Gerald becomes a very instrumental character because he is very confident and he moves the other characters into making excuses. This is where there becomes an important split between Gerald, Mrs. Burling and Eric and Sheila. His characteristics between the start and the end change a great deal. He becomes a lot more self-aware. There is also a developing relationship with Burling going on throughout the play that's important to look at, the way that he becomes much more open towards how he feels about his father. Eric also has a key part to play in the crisis point, the twist, the false ending, with the big revelation that he is the father of Eva Smith's unborn child. Perhaps Eric's key role structurally is for Priestley to show us how characters have the capacity to change, especially characters who belong to the younger generation. We shouldn't forget, of course, these two characters who are also extremely important in terms of the structure of the play. We can have a look at the way Priestley structures the play in three parts: before, during and after the appearance of the inspector. We could also write about why the inspector chooses the sequence for questioning that he does. As far as Eva Smith is concerned, it's also interesting to look at the sequence of events in terms of Eva Smith's life, the way that her character builds and her story becomes increasingly tragic, referring to her overall demise. As we move on to themes and ideas of the play, let's not forget that what we're focusing on here is structure. So how does the theme of social responsibility show itself in the structure of the play? Well, firstly it does through the characters of the Inspector and Eva Smith. What we see is a series of increasingly serious revelations about Eva's story, and this demonstrates the increasingly serious effects of neglecting public duty. This is something, of course, that Arthur Burling is responsible for. His refusal to change and not accept responsibility is linked very much to his belief in capitalism and his selfishness. Thirdly, we have Mrs. Burling and Gerald. These two characters belong to an upper class. It's important to look at Eric and Sheila in terms of how they are at the start of the play compared to the end. Both characters mature as they accept the role that they've had in Eva Smith's subsequent demise. So how does class work within the structure of the play? Well, if we take these four characters, what we can see is how the cosy initial setup linked to the soft lighting at the start of the play is blown apart and the cracks in the class system begin to show. Also, with the characters of Gerald, Burling and Eva Smith, we can see a clear establishment of the class system as it was when the play was set in 1912, represented by the three characters. We also might want to think about Edna's small part in the play as well. Mrs. Burling is an interesting character to look at in terms of the structure of the play. She's very much from a higher social status, more so than her husband. By the end of Act 2, she has to accept that she has a connection with the lower classes via the Eric and Eva relationship, which is interesting. Finally, we have the character of Burling. Despite events, Burling tries to gain power through connections, and he's very reluctant to let go of this. We can look at his different connections to characters as the play progresses, to Gerald, Alderman Meggerty, Colonel Roberts. His inferiority, however, gradually gets revealed. Priestley also structures ideas about gender throughout the play. Let's consider the character of Eva Smith. Each character's story reveals the strength of Eva's character, despite what's thrown at her, and this becomes increasingly obvious as the play moves on, even though she's tested to her limits by the end. Also, with these three characters, as the play progresses, we see building examples of men exploiting women. They get worse each time, initially in the workplace and then through sexual exploitation. Through the character of Sheila, and a changing character, Priestley demonstrates how women can use their position to overcome gender barriers of the early 20th century. And finally, through the contrast between the characters of Mrs. Burling and Eva Smith, Mrs. Burling does have an opportunity to defend her own sex, but her class bias and her selfishness stop her from doing so. The obvious point to make is that Sheila and Eric show us that younger characters have the chance to change, and older characters less so. There are some other interesting ideas though. Take for example the relationship between Burling and Eva Smith. Here we're shown that the inequality of a capitalist society ruins opportunity for bright young working class women such as Eva. It's also interesting to note that Gerald bucks the trend when it comes to younger characters learning. Priestley wants to demonstrate here that the British class system overrides generations and will be ongoing unless it's challenged. Finally, we can look at how dramatic techniques play a part in the structure of the play. So props, for example, the use of the telephone at a key point at the beginning and then again at the end. Edna as a kind of an onlooker in the play, and even bring in references to how different productions approach the play, such as the recent National Theatre performance. Entrances and exits are extremely important in the play. There's a point where Eric leaves and then returns again. What is the reason behind that? Also, the expectation that women should leave the room when certain things are being discussed. Priestley challenges that. Inspector Gould is very much a dramatic device. It's also interesting to note how different characters react to his character. Compare, for example, Sheila's to Mrs. Burling's. Stage directions in the play are of course very important. So looking at the way adverbs change between Acts 1 and 3 for particular characters. Take Sheila for example. A very limited number of locations bring a kind of claustrophobia to the overall play. Priestley sets events in real time, which also increases the sense of drama throughout the play. And of course there are those lighting changes before, during and after the inspector's appearances, which are very important to mention. So another way you could use this English hack is with exam questions. If you have an exam question about Gerald, for example, just take all the different elements to do with structure and Gerald's character, get them together and write up your point. Of course, what we're lacking is support from the text. Find your examples, drop them in the comments below, telling us where they relate to the points in the video.
See you next time for more great English hacks.